In life, we encounter people every day, all of whom have stories to share. We rarely take the time to ask people their personal stories, many of which will touch, move, and inspire us in some way. Matt has a passion for making authentic connections and learning about people from all walks of life. He has lived a life of giving back to the community and making a difference in people's lives. Are you ready to meet fascinating people and hear some inspiring stories? The Matt Hilton Show will introduce you to a world of possibilities you never knew existed. Sit back, be present, and enjoy. Here's your host, Matt Hilton.
Hey everyone, Matt Hilton with the Matt Hilton Show. Today's guest is a great friend of mine. He's a past reporter here in the Dallas market. He owns a public relations firm now, and he loves to help the homeless and others. You don't want to miss this show. Stay tuned for a word from our sponsor.
Inspired, experienced, customer-focused. Find a mortgage that fits your needs with Maria Leach at First United Bank Mortgage, specializing in construction and closing all types of loans, including jumbo, portfolio, conventional, FHA, and VA. A tenured team, outstanding service, competitive programs. Finance your dreams with Maria Leach at First United Bank Mortgage. mleach.firstunitedteam.com, 214-316-7915. mleach at firstunitedbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Welcome everybody to this episode of the Matt Hilton Show, and today's guest is none other than the owner of Real News Communications Network, Jeff Crilley. Jeff, thank you for being here today.
Well,
it's a pleasure.
Well, I do my own show, and it's so weird being on this side. So, and he's a great host, and I hope he keeps the questions kind.
We'll see about that. Yeah. So, if you wouldn't mind, my audience may not know a lot about Jeff Crilley. So, tell us a little bit about you, as far as where you may have grown up.
Sure. So, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. My dad was a minister in downtown Detroit, and I think that's where this getting into television came from, because my father would feed homeless people in the basement of the church, and he became kind of the voice and face of homelessness in Detroit. And I would always see him on TV being interviewed by these, local stars in Detroit. And I thought to myself, man, that would be a cool career. So went to Michigan State for college, got a job in TV news, local TV news, while I was a college student. So by junior year, I'm a reporter. By senior year, I'm the weekend anchorman. Went from Lansing, Michigan to Omaha to Minneapolis to Dallas. So the last 15 years of my career was at Channel 4 here in Dallas.
That's right. I remember growing up.
Now don't say that. He's going to say I came to his elementary school, and I'm
something like that. No. Promoted this book that you're writing now. So no, that's interesting. That was a follow-up question I had. Is has media always been in your blood? Have you wanted, like when I was in kindergarten, our teacher asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Right. So is that what you always wanted to be as a reporter?
I think, as far as I can remember, I always wanted to be in front of the camera. Okay. And that was the reason I went to Michigan State, because it was my older brother, Bob, went to U of M, which was, it was a harder degree. Mine was the party school that had a good communications program. And then as soon as I got to college, I was like, man, I need to get myself in front of the camera. And the interesting story, I'll share it with you. I got an internship at the local CBS station in Lansing, Michigan. And it was a 10-week internship. I was a crazy man. I was just almost auditioning for a job. So instead of working the 20 hours a week I was supposed to work, I worked 60 hours a week. And the internship came and went. So it was a 10-week internship. It was over. But I thought to myself, man, if I tell the station that the internship is over, I got to leave. If I don't tell them it's over, I get to stay. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how I figured I would going to get through this, but I never told them that the internship was over. I was 15 weeks into a 10-week internship when I was busted. And the news director basically took pity on me. He had never seen anybody want it that bad. And he gave me a job as kind of a newsroom assistant. And then I really worked hard. And the next thing you know, I was a part-time reporter, full-time reporter, and weekend anchor. But I guess the lesson there for anybody watching is, when you find out what you were born to do it with gusto, and don't just kind of, do it halfway. Go all the way.
Yeah, because it's simply not going to be just handed to you.
Yes.
Right? And that's what I hear you saying too, is pursue what you want to do, what your passion is.
Absolutely.
Don't wait for it to come to you.
And I would say that to any young person today, grit. I mean, you and I come from generations where as soon as you graduated high school, you didn't necessarily get the brand new car. You had to work for everything you got. And I think many parents today are too eager to just give their kids everything so they'll have a better life than they did. But there's some stick-to-itiveness that you learn when you get knocked down and scrape your knee, and you're not wrapped in bubble wrap.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You being in the media, I'm sure you've had a lot of stories that you've done over the years, right?
Sure.
And so the question I have for you is, what is one story that really affected you personally? That was a really difficult story maybe to report on.
Though I won an award for this one. I won an Emmy Award for it. It was a little girl, well, I shouldn't say a little girl, a graduating senior at Highland Park High School. Her name was Chrissy, and she had a kind of a dying wish, if you will, because she was a Make-A-Wish kid. And so I got word that she wasn't going to see graduation day, and they basically had a ceremony in her bedroom, and she took her, what do they call
the tassel?
The tassel, yeah. and threw it in the air. And so I did the story. What was tough about it, Matt, was when I did the story, she's still alive, and so I'm in the van editing this story, knowing that this young lady has maybe another 2 weeks to live. Oh. And I found myself saying, God, I don't have the words. Give me the words. I mean, what do you say as a journalist to somebody who's going to be watching this in their bedroom, and one of her last memories on the planet will be the way you reported this story? And so I just kind of prayed. I said, God, I don't have the words. Please give me the right words. And so I wrote this piece, and I remember turning to the camera and saying, Chrissy, I know you're in your bedroom right now watching this. I think I speak for every one of the Fox 4 viewers to tell you that you're in our hearts right now, and we're all praying for you. And as soon as the report was over, I got a call from Brad Hawkins, who at the time was a reporter for Channel 8. And reporters don't call each other, especially competitors. And he says, Jeff Crilley, you did an amazing job. We're all here bawling our eyes out in the Channel 8 newsroom. You did an amazing job. So the story then kind of takes on a life of its own. It gets replayed on Fox News. Next thing you know, Chrissy's getting a phone call from Bush, W, because she went to the same church as W did. And we did another series of reports about, her getting the phone call from President Bush. And then there was a candlelight service on her front lawn, and then eventually she passed. But I remember entering that as for an award, an Emmy Award. And I got the Emmy Award that year. And I remember thinking to myself, this is not mine. This does not belong to me. It wasn't my words, it was God's words. And so I went over to Chrissy's house. This is maybe 6 months after she passed. And I gave the trophy to her mom, and it's still on their mantle. The Emmy Award is on her mantle.
Wow. You're not supposed to make the host cry. No, I mean, wow, I feel like I was living that story with you.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. I can only imagine how emotionally charging some of these stories can be, whether it's, personal emotions, whether it's political emotions, whether it's whatever it is, right?
Yes.
And so the premise of this show is fascinating people and inspiring stories. And who's a fascinating person that you've interviewed? Like that you find they may not be an inspiring person, but they were just so fascinating.
I do remember one. It's a guy named Hal Samples, and he's still here in Dallas. I had, when I wrote my book about publicity, I started running around giving speeches about publicity, and pretty soon I'm doing these classes, if you will, or workshops on publicity. And one of the people in the room was named Hal Samples, and he says, Jeff, I take pictures of homeless people. And I was like, that's kind of an interesting path. Why do you do that? He says, because I was at one time homeless myself. His story goes, he was a hotshot car salesman. He started making way too much money. He started doing coke, and he had this terrible downward spiral where the last thing that he remembers is he's now homeless. He's got fired from the job. And while he was homeless, he remembers talking to another homeless person, and he says to the other homeless person, "What's the worst thing about being homeless?" And he says, "I hate being invisible." And Hal says, "Invisible?" He says, "Yeah, you watch. People will not look you in the eye, because if they look you in the eye, they have to see humanity, and then they might need to care about you." And so he made it, he was a good photographer, so he made it his mission to start taking pictures of homeless people and really capturing their essence. And so I ended up doing that story for Fox 4. It ended up airing on Fox News. And as a thank you gift, he gave me this picture. It was a really cool black and white artsy picture of a Campbell soup can that was opened, and it's just sitting on a grill underneath an overpass. And he titled it Soup Kitchen. And it's so beautifully shot that it hangs on my wall today. And as a reminder, not only of, my dad's ministry, but, but the grace of God go all of us, right?
That's right. That's right.
I really got you choked up today.
Maybe a little bit, yeah. So if there's one thing that you would tell your younger self that you know today, you've probably watched some of my episodes, and that's a common question that I ask. What would that be?
I think I would say to the younger self, enjoy the ride, because I think what I was doing in those very early days was kind of living in the future. So my college experience, if you ask me about my college experience, I didn't have a college experience. I was a reporter. So I put on that hat and I was going to be a reporter. And, everybody needs those days when you're, going to college and having the college experience and getting drunk and all of the stuff that goes along with college. And I was too in a hurry. And I remember having my whole career path, charted out, where I was going to be a network correspondent by the time I was 30, and then I was going to be the main anchor of the #1 station by the time I'm 40, and I'm going to do this and this and this. And what is that expression? Man plans, God laughs, or something like that. Because we all have to remember we're not in the driver's seat, we're in the passenger seat, and we can say, "God, don't you want to take a right or a left?" But it's going to happen the way it's supposed to happen, and I would just say, enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. Did you hear that? Enjoy the ride. I love that. It's another way of something that I say all the time is being in the moment.
Yes.
Right? Being present, being there.
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't hear that.
Quit looking at your phone, Jeff. So as you you said earlier that, you wrote a book, and that's where we met about a decade ago. Right. We were talking about this before the show. And I was involved with the McKinney Chamber, and you came and you did a workshop, I think it was, on free publicity, which was the book that you had written. And so what was the thinking behind writing that book? Like, what value did you want to give others by putting that out there?
So there's a cute story that goes along with that. I was having lunch with a PR person, somebody in Dallas who I respect, and she had pitched me stories in the past. And in 2001, we're having lunch. And she puts her press releases on the table, and she says, "What am I doing wrong?" And I just kind of went through the press releases, and I told her why each one of these press releases would not work. We're too busy. This isn't sexy enough. I told her what was wrong with the press releases, and she said, "You need to write a book." I said, "I'm sure there's a million books on PR." She says, "Yeah, but they're all written by PR people." And so that night I go on Amazon, I start looking through the Bibles of the PR industry from guerrilla marketing on down, and I couldn't see any journalism. So the book was really an inspiration and a way of saying, here's how you get on the news. Here's what you should say to a reporter. Here's what you should never say to a reporter. Here are the best times. Here are the worst times. Here's how you handle a crisis event where the media's, on your doorstep, but for the wrong reasons. And it was an A to Z guide. What I did not predict, Matt, when I wrote the book was it would become my exit from TV. And my whole identity was tied up in TV news. So I never really intended to leave TV news, but I just discovered that, man, I was having more fun speaking and making people laugh than I was doing the news. And often towards the end of my news career, and it ended in 2008 when I quit, I was doing a lot of murders and fires, and you
Mhm.
talk about having those moments where you're taking on somebody's grief. Sometimes I'm in the living room of a family who just lost a loved one hours earlier, and I am honestly just taking on all of that, because in order to be a good reporter, you have to empathize, and to empathize with a grieving family where the wound is that fresh. I felt like I was constantly taking on grief, and after a while, it was wearying. And I said, I think I would rather tell happy stories and help people, tell their own story. And now here we are in studios where
Yeah.
you're getting to tell very unique stories, all your own. I got to brag on Matt, because you and I became reacquainted, I want to say about a year ago, right? And I showed you some of our studios, and I remember laying on your heart about a year ago, you should think about doing a television show. And I think it took a little while for you to adjust to that idea, but you called me up, and it was a very happy day, because you said, Jeff, I'm going to take you up on that. We're gonna do a show.
Yeah.
And I think you get a lot of joy from this, don't you?
Oh, I do. I get a ton of joy from it, and that was something I wanted to bring up as well. Is you brought me in because I had created a nonprofit, and you brought me in to interview. I reached out to you to ask you, hey, I'd love to tell you about my nonprofit, and you said, well, why don't you be on the show?
Right,
So I took a page from your free publicity book.
All right, this is the part of the Matt Hilton Show where Jeff takes over, and now I'm asking.
No. I was afraid of that. No. So that's what happened. And you interviewed me, and it was, and afterwards you said, I think you would be really good at doing something, like this in this format. So I thought about it, prayed about it. It wasn't something I'm really in the past have been really bad about making quick decisions and not thinking through. So I really wanted to think about what was going to be the format, who were going to be my guests initially to get it off the ground. And so I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, no, I love to see you in the hallways, and Matt has such a kind heart and a generous spirit. It's nice. I mean, you add an extra something to this studio, because you bring joy. And when I see you now in the hallways, it's always like, okay, Matt, what episode are we on now? Do you remember? What episode is this? Do you remember?
I don't. It's probably 10 or 11,
right?
Something like that.
See,
so
that's really cool.
Yeah. It's fun. So as we move, I want to go back real quick, because you did say something that I just want to validate what you said.
Sure.
You said, when man makes a plan, God laughs, right? You had a plan of being in that newsroom.
I did.
You had a plan of, you wanted to be, this lead reporter, you wanted to be so by a certain age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you thought that was going to happen, but then you wrote the book, and as you said, it kind of took you out of that role, out of that environment, right? So you had a plan, and God had another one for you. So,
yes.
and we're here today, right, at Real News Communications Network, and it's interesting because how long ago did you change the name? Because it used to be Real News Public Relations.
So we actually have both names. So my
Okay.
daughter named this network. It's kind of funny, and we still have the letters. They're out in the lobby. I came in one day because we'd started to do shows, and I came in one day and I saw these letters, RNCN, and my daughter's my vice president, and so I innocently asked. I said, "What is RNCN, Sarah?" And she says, "The Real News Communications Network, Dad." I was like, I kind of like that. And about that time, fake news had come along. So real news versus fake news. I was like, I do like RNCN. And it kind of, looks like call letters for a radio station like
Sure.
WKRP or something like that. And so it stuck. And I'm so glad that we ended up naming it that, because when you look on Google at our body of work, and now there's like, thousands and thousands of shows, Google and YouTube see us as a network no different than ABC or NBC. If you look back through the body of our work, it looks like a network you might find in New York.
Yeah. And being in communications as much as you have, you've seen it evolve over the years. So I'm going to ask you to look in your crystal ball real quick.
Okay.
Where do you see reporting and this social media and communications as a whole evolving over the coming, let's just say, decade?
Yes. So what I see happening is commercial television in general is on the decline. It's just slowly, um, the audiences are eroding. Why? Because we all have this rectangle.
Mhm.
And most of the time, people don't care how it got to the rectangle, whether it came from YouTube or, our website or ABC News New York. We don't really differentiate anymore. And so what I see happening with our network and how this is the future is what we have clients that we get on the news all the time, local news, NBC, ABC, CBS. And sometimes they'll come back and they'll say, oh, yeah, but I only got 3 minutes. And I'm like, well, I can't control that. That's not my candy store. But now we have this candy store where you can tell your own story without editing or fear of censorship or anything like that.
Right.
And the epiphany for me, Matt, was, and the viewer can do this as well, go to YouTube and just put in teenage makeup tips. And you'll see a 13-year-old girl doing makeup, and you'll see the subscribers, and you'll see 3 million followers. Well, to put that into perspective, the CBS Evening News only reaches about 900,000 right now. So if a 13-year-old girl on a webcam can have triple the audience of the CBS Evening News, it means the thing has already shifted. So we're already there. I liken it to Blockbuster and Netflix. You remember when Blockbuster was the behemoth, and then there was this little gnat called Netflix that was just kind of buzzing around its ear? Well, I believe that Netflix has already passed Blockbuster, and Blockbuster being commercial television. I think social media has already overtaken the networks, and the networks may not know it yet. And so this is the future. The future is become the media. And that's exactly what we're doing today. The show that you're doing right now might not air on ABC or NBC or CBS. Why? It's their candy store. But you don't need their permission.
Yeah.
You wake up with an idea. I'm going to be the executive producer. I'm going to interview who I want to interview. If I want to talk about my faith on the air, I'm going to talk about my faith on the air, and without fear of some general manager of some station saying, no, you can't say that.
I love that. And thank you for sharing. It's just been a question that I've, because I'm in real estate, and real estate has evolved, right?
Yes,
From, going and picking up a key from another broker's office to go show the house, to having a lockbox that gives the listing agent, information about who just entered the house. So it's very interesting how everything evolves in life, right? So, yeah. What is one question that you wish that someone would ask you that you've never been asked before?
Jeff Crilley, if you could be a tree. No, not that question. Maybe the question would be, Jeff, what do you think this is all about? What is this whole thing called life about? Because I have a little glimpse into what I think life is about.
So what is it about, Jeff?
Life is not about anything that we make it about. We make it about fame and fortune. And I mean, if you watch TV, you see what we make it out to be. The big house, the big career, the big life, the fame, the fortune. And I don't think it's about anything like that. So I have this vision of heaven, and I know you're a believer, where we get greeted at the pearly gates. I'm not sure who greets us. It could be God. It could be Jesus, St. Peter. Somebody greets us at the pearly gates. And I think what happens is whoever that is says, Jeff, good news is you're in. Nothing more to prove for the rest of eternity. We'll show you to your cloud here in a minute. But before you go ahead and enjoy, eternity in heaven, I'm going to take you to a theater room, and I'm going to show you some moments in your life when I was extremely proud of you. And then I'm going to show you some moments when I was not so proud of you. And so we're sitting there with the popcorn, with the butter, because calories don't count anymore. And we're all ready to see the highlights of our life, the 100 years, if we're lucky enough to get it. And the scenes that we're shown have nothing to do with anything that we made important. And so I have this vision that I'm seeing this scene of me in a restaurant when I'm 23-year-old, and I'm saying something very kind to the waiter. I don't actually remember this scene, but God is telling me, Jeff, I was so proud of you because that waiter was going to commit suicide at the end of his shift. He was going to go home and he was going to just take care of it. And your kindness prevented him from doing that. And he went on to have an amazing life and, 20 grandkids and all of this. I was really proud of you because it didn't matter. Nobody else was watching. You were just kind when it didn't matter. And then he showed me several other, forgettable moments that I long forgot, but God remembered. And then I think he shows me some scenes where he's not proud of me. And I'm not here saying that I do a good job with this. I wrestle with this every day. I think God shows me a montage, a quick cut of about 1,000 homeless people on the side of the road. And God says, I know, Jeff, on average, you always carry $100, $150 in your wallet. You never even looked at me, Jeff. That was me every single time. Hal Samples taught you to look in the eyes of homeless people, and you ignored me all those times. And I'm not proud of you for that. And I'm here, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm not saying that I look into the eyes of homeless people every time I see them on the side of the road. But I think I have a little tinge of guilt every time I don't look at them in the eyes.
Yeah. And expounding upon that a little, for me, what I hear too out of that is it's not just the homeless, it's anybody, right? And any opportunity that presents itself. If we don't walk through that door and if we don't do something about a need that presents itself, that's not a proud moment.
I want to compliment Matt here because you guys can't
Here we go again.
No, you can't see this, but there's been 3 times during this conversation where you get a little misty, and that tells me a lot about your heart and the wavelength that you are putting out to the planet. And that's why we like each other so much, is I see you, you see me. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us, is that we just have to look into each other's eyes and know that there's another human there who could be hurting, and we have something that we can give them always.
Yeah, for sure. What's your greatest fear?
Well, I have this.
And don't say becoming a tree.
No. My greatest fear, I have this perfect life. When people say, what's your happiness, 1 to 10? I always say 12. What could possibly make me happier? I'm in love with my soulmate. Victoria and I have been married now more than 20 years. We love each other. My kids work with me in the business. My daughter's my vice president. My son's my head of business development. Even my grandson, Caleb, now is 12 years old, and he fashions himself as the future owner of Real News PR. In fact, I'm thinking about making a little card for him that says future owner, as long as you do your homework. So, my wife has a beef with Caleb. She's like, if you're going to be the future owner, we gotta talk about a few things. But anyway, I guess the fear would be somehow messing it up, somehow, doing something that would cause all of this to drift away, because I can't imagine life being as glorious as it is right now.
Yeah. So you spoke about your bride. How did you and Victoria meet?
So Victoria was a young reporter, and she was in Wichita Falls, and she was covering the Cowboys. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a training camp that happened in Wichita Falls. So this would be the late 90s, and ran into her, and just smitten. And
she definitely married up.
I did marry up. So instantly just head over heels in love. A story that my station doesn't even know is I decided to live in Wichita Falls and commute to Dallas. And I was the morning reporter in Dallas, which means I had to be on air at 6 a.m. in the field someplace. But I was hopelessly crazy in love with Victoria. I decided to move in and commute. And I don't know if you've ever driven to Wichita Falls, but it's 2.5 hours each way. So I was spending 5 hours a day in a car to see my beloved. I was just crazy head over heels. And then finally, she got a job at Channel 33. There's a cute story. Can I tell you? So we're trying to get her out of Wichita Falls because I was slowly losing my mind. I was getting about 3 hours of sleep. And so I had read this book called 303 Offbeat Ways to Get a Job. And one of the tips was take a cheese pizza. It can be a $6 cheese pizza. take your resume, flip it upside down, put it on the box so you have something to write on, and say, hire me, I always deliver. And then you write, I know this is a cheesy way, underlying cheesy, so they get the pun, cheesy way to get your attention, but I'd do anything for a job interview at WXYZ. So I delivered this pizza on her behalf to Channel 33 here in Dallas. And normally as a reporter, you wanted to get recognized. But this was the one time I was like, please don't recognize me, because they would be thinking, man, it's hard times at Channel 4 if the reporters are delivering pizzas over the lunch hour. But so I managed to deliver this pizza. 5 minutes later, her phone rings in Wichita Falls, and it's the news director saying, okay, pizza girl, you got my attention. What are you doing tomorrow? So she took the next day off, drove down to Dallas, got the job at Channel 33, and never looked back.
Wow. That is a great story. That is a great story. Is there another story behind a person who changed your life?
I guess my dad, and I channel my dad every day. God bless, he is alive and well and retired, living in Waco with my mom. My dad is 88 years old and in good health.
Okay.
And so I channel my dad all the time, because people say, what would Jesus do? I kind of say, what would dad do? And dad is the all-loving dad. If he was here right now, you would feel his energy. You would feel his heart. He just loves the world. And I try to channel my dad as much as I can. And I think you asked me earlier, what is a fear? One of my fears is something happens to mom or dad, because now they're in their 80s and we don't know how long we have with them. And I need to spend every moment I can with them.
Yeah. So outside of your children, what's your proudest accomplishment, Jeff? And don't say, this network that you've created, throughout life.
Well, I helped free an innocent man from prison one time.
Oh.
So he was a guy who had been wrongly convicted of a robbery that his brother committed. And so he was wrongly incarcerated. And I was at that phase of my news career where I was like, I saw Mike Wallace free an innocent man from prison. I want to free an innocent man from prison. And so I called down to the Innocence Project in Houston, where they have their law college assigning cases of innocence to graduate students. And I called down there and I said, hey, I need a true case of innocence in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And they turned me on to this case. And what I did not know, Matt, is the prison system is real good at putting people away, not so good at getting people out. Right. So I'll shorten the story, but we had to get a lie detector test from not only the brother who was on the outside, but the brother who was wrongly convicted. And if you know anything about the prison system, the warden is the king of the castle. And it's not like you can just say, hey, we're going to waltz in and give this guy a lie detector test. So it took almost an act of Congress to get him out and get a lie detector test. But finally, we got this to Rick Perry's desk. And on 2 days before Christmas, I get a call from the governor's office. And the governor's office says, okay, Jeff Crilley, you have a 1 hour head start on the rest of the media. In 1 hour, we will announce that we're freeing James Byrd, and you've got 1 hour. And so it's kind of like in the movie where they do the slow clap. So our station had done dozens of stories throughout that whole year. So I stood up and I could barely talk. I said, hey guys, the governor is freeing James Byrd just in time for Christmas. And they all stood up, Clarice, Sean Rabb, and they're doing the slow clap. And then I thought to myself, I got to get to Fort Worth. And so we raced to Fort Worth. Yeah, we raced to Fort Worth. We greeted the mom, the elderly mom, and she hugged me. She hugged the cameraman, and I went down to Huntsville with a bunch of other media people, and we were there for him to walk out of prison, a free man, and he had a fiance who had stuck with him the whole time, and he announced to the whole crowd gathered, he says, you're all invited to my wedding, and Jeff Crilley, if you'll do me the honor, I would like you to be my best man. And so how cool was that? So I got to be the best man, and I've lost contact with him. I need to reach out to him and see how he's doing. It's been 20 years now.
Yeah, you should do that.
Yeah. I would like that.
I'd love to hear a follow-up story on that, Jeff.
Yes. Maybe he can come on the Matt Hilton Show.
Hey, there we go. You never know. Is there anything that you have done in the past that you would never do again, and why? And it's okay to be vulnerable.
That I would never do again. I think I almost go back to enjoying the moments, because most of my life has been spent kind of living in the future. Even this network, we had these little studios, and then we had bigger studios, and now we have the even bigger studios. I don't think I've been able to savor every minute the way I should. Just enjoy every little stop along the way, because we learn stuff. And if you're always thinking about the next, and you'll forget what it's all about. I'll give you a strange analogy. If I'm a big Beatles fan, so if Ringo and Paul were here today, and we asked them about Beatlemania, they probably would be bored to tears, because that's what they always talk about. But if we asked them about life before they were famous, tell us about when you were 15 and were just learning how to play the guitar, and you guys probably didn't have 2 coins to rub together, because they all came from Liverpool and were very poor. Their eyes would probably light up, and they would be delighted to talk about the early days before they were famous. And I'm using that analogy because those were probably some of their happiest days. I can imagine that Beatlemania got a little out of control and they felt suffocated. Every pit stop along the way of life, savor it for what it is.
Yeah. So going back to you bringing me in almost a year ago and interviewing me for this nonprofit. So just to, again, let the viewers and listeners know that I'm the Chief Happiness Officer of Who Do You Know, which is a nonprofit. And we focus on inspiring imagination and granting people's wishes and dreams from any walk of life by making connections. So we focus on 3 pillars: a person you want to meet, a place you want to go, and an experience you want to have. So I ask my guests when they're on my show those 3 questions.
Matt, you ask a lot of questions.
I know I do. So, who is a person that you would love to meet that you have not had the opportunity to meet?
I guess I'm going to have to say Paul McCartney. I mean, I'm a huge Beatle fan, and I think Sir Paul, everything I've heard about Sir Paul is that he's just a very nice guy. And like if he was here right now, he would look you in the eye and he'd really be present for you. So Paul McCartney would be, one of my bucket list heroes to meet.
Okay. Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney.
All right. Place you want to go.
Paul, if you're watching, and we know you're a regular.
Give me a call. We can arrange you to come into the studio and meet him live on the air. Place you want to go?
So our love city is Paris. I want to go back to France. I think so. We've been to France twice. There's something about the birds chirping, the Eiffel Tower, the sounds and smells and baguettes. And have you been to Paris?
Oh yeah.
So I've been there before. I'd love to go back to Paris again.
Okay. And you said France. So have you been to the south of France? Have you been to other parts of France?
We've been to Nice, and if my wife was here, she would tell you every stop that we've made in France, but I can only remember Paris and Nice. Is that bad?
No, it's not bad. No judgment. Experience you want to have?
Experience I want to have?
Like, as an example, jumping out of a plane or going to a Cowboys game, on Thanksgiving Day.
All right, I've got one. This is a heavy one. I used to go to the Upper Peninsula with my family as a little kid. So we grew up in Detroit, and you just go over the bridge at Mackinac, and there's Lake Superior. And some of my happiest childhood memories were camping with my family. Now, my wife, her idea of camping is the Hilton, not your family's Hilton, but she's like kind of Ritz and Four Seasons. So I don't know that I could get my wife camping, but it might be a cool boys trip to take Dad camping in the Upper Peninsula.
Dad and your son and your grandson.
Yeah, and bring those memories.
Yeah.
I like that.
Isn't that great? Yeah, have all generations there.
I like
and
that.
Creating those memories. Yeah,
That's
for sure.
Man, you really get deep.
Well, so one other question before we
Sure.
end today's show
Sure.
is there anything that I should have asked you that you would have liked for me to have asked you today?
I'm going to steal some of these questions. Can I have your notes? These are actually really good questions, Matt. Is there anything that you could have asked me that you didn't ask me? I've loved this journey. What I've loved most is it's just a great conversation between friends, and it doesn't feel like we're on live TV and having a conversation near lights. Is there anything you could have asked me? Okay, you could have asked me what gets you out of bed in the morning. So I'll tell you that. So I started this labor of love close to 14 years ago. It's called The Rundown. It's a daily email that now goes out to 27,000 journalists across the country. I've not missed a day in 13 years or 14 years, not Christmas Day, not New Year's Day, for 14 years. And so if you can imagine, there were days when I was sick or I'm waking up in Vegas after having a late night, and I have not missed a single day. So sometimes when I wake up in the morning and I'll say to myself, oh, I'm tired. If I catch myself saying I have to do my daily email, I quickly catch myself and say, no. You get to. You get to have influence with 27,000 journalists. What an honor, what a privilege that these journalists actually look forward to my daily offerings and take me into their lives and become an important part of so many journalists' lives. So, yes, what gets me out of bed in the morning is the idea that I'm going to be able to work on my daily e-blast, come in here. Normally, I'm the guy doing the interviews, and working with my kids and now my grandson.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time and your friendship.
I'm stealing
No.
these for my next interview.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here for another episode of the Matt Hilton Show. And please tune in next week as we have another fascinating person with an inspiring story. See y'all later.
The Matt Hilton Show would like to thank our sponsors, Hilton Realty Advisors and Maria Leach with the First United Mortgage Group. The Matt Hilton Show would also like to thank our partners, the Who Do You Know organization. You can find out more at wdyk.org. If you'd like to contact Matt or know a fascinating person with an inspiring story that would make a great guest, reach out to the show at themattHiltonshow@gmail.com.